How's everybody doing?
Yeah. Good, great.
How's everybody doing?
Great.
It's a lovely night in New York City, and I'm very happy to be here. My name is Clint Smith. I'm a high school English teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside of D.C. There we go. It's Prince George's County, Maryland, from there. There we go. All right. And so I'm very excited to be part of the Teacher PR Corps. I'm very excited to be here. And for me, social media is very important because it has very much kind of shaped my trajectory as an educator and as a poet. I'm a spoken word artist. Who here knows what spoken word poetry is? Okay, there we go, we got some facts. So a lot of what I try to do with my work is kind of reframe the narrative around our students. Because I think oftentimes there's a very one-dimensional conversation about who our students are and what their lives are like. And for me, that's unfair and directly permeates into city council, state legislatures, and Congress, where we have policies in place that are directly threatening the well-being of our students' lives, because we continue to talk about our students as if they were less than human. Often students of color, students from low-income communities. And so through my poetry, so much of it is informed by the lives of my students, their families, and our community. And I kind of see it as this opportunity to, again, reframe the narrative around our students and talk about the things that they're presented with and the things they have to overcome every day, and how for so many of us, we can't even fathom the lives that they've had to live. And when we think about them, let's not think about all of the things that are holding them down, but really how they overcome it every single day. And so I'm going to do a couple poems at the beginning, a couple poems at the end. But I'll do a couple of them right now that kind of speak to issues that exist in the lives of my students that are the result of different policies and pieces of legislation that are or are not in place, and kind of speak to how those things affect my students' lives. Because I think so often we have these policies and politics become very meta, and we don't really recognize how these things are affecting people's lives on the ground. And so these poems are an effort to express how they affect my students' lives through the lens of being in the classroom. Every year, my students read Night by Elie Wiesel. Following completion of the novel, I assigned them the task of writing their own memoir. Maria came to America when she was 5 years old, wrote that she had to cross a river before she ever knew what it meant to swim, ran through knee-high grass as if the field were made of landmines, hid under the belly of trucks amid concrete and fertilizer so as not to leave a scent for the dogs. She did not know why she was running, but she knew that her mother cried every night for her father. She knew she was beginning to forget the outline of her daddy's face. She knew that he worked 18 hours a day just to provide them with food that they could barely find at home. She knew that he loved them and wanted to remember what it felt like to hold his daughter in his arms. But Maria was 5. She doesn't remember life in Mexico. She remembers kindergarten and sleepovers and middle school graduation. She is more American than any slice of apple pie, but that is not what we tell her. We punish Maria for just following directions, for being a child who is simply listening to her parents. We tell her parents that they are wrong for wanting a better life for their family. We tell her that a 4.0 isn't good enough. We tell Maria that college wasn't meant for girls like her. We say too much brown skin. We say too much accent. We say where'd you come from? We say you don't have a number, so you don't exist. We have embedded apathy into the eyelids of this country, and now we can barely see what's right in front of us. It's hard to convince someone to do well in school when the law tells them that it won't matter. When you're a number before you're a face. How convenient that we forget our own history. A country of immigrants who were once told we didn't belong. An assemblage of faces simply waiting for our country to see us. So, obviously issues such as immigration have become hugely important to me and hugely urgent in a way that they weren't necessarily before I came into the classroom. Every day I teach undocumented students. Actually, our valedictorian, the person who was first in our class right now, has not been accepted to any of the schools she's applied to because she is undocumented. And I think things like that really bring it home and make it real. When we have conversations, when people are having conversations on Capitol Hill about comprehensive immigration reform, we can get stuck in the language and the jargon and the numbers and the budget cuts. But when you have like a student who's done everything right for her entire life, came here when she was 4 years old, and can't be accepted to the university she's applying to, you know that there's something profoundly wrong with the system we're part of. Another issue I'm very much passionate about is this issue of food access. And so I teach in Prince George's County, which is a juxtaposition in and of itself, because it is both the largest concentration of black wealth in America, at the same time is labeled a food desert by the USDA. So it's kind of a tale of two counties. You have Prince George's County inside the Beltway, you have Prince George's County outside the Beltway. Outside the Beltway is very affluent, and that's where most of the wealth is concentrated. Inside the Beltway, it's a lot of immigrant populations, it's a lot of folks who have been gentrified out of Washington, D.C. As a result of the gentrification that's happening in the city. And it creates this kind of urban, suburban, different sort of atmosphere. That a place that was originally suburban, but now has kind of had an urban influx. And one of the issues that exists is that there is an inability for our students and for these families to get access to healthy foods. And so I see that every day. And for me, I'm really passionate about not only what's happening in the classroom, but what's happening in our students' lives before they ever step into the classroom. Right? We can't have a conversation about the achievement gap or the opportunity gap or any of these gaps that exist if we're not going to have a larger conversation about the factors that play a role in what a student is able to do before they ever step into school. So this poem, I'll talk about a little bit later, the role that social media has played in kind of presenting it to the world. It's called Place Matters. As a child, my father would tell me stories of ancient Egyptian warriors, traveling for endless days and nights across infinite desert plains, showing signs of endurance and bravery I could only dream of emulating. He would tell me that upon their return home, these warriors would be welcomed with a feast worthy of their bravery on the battlefield. Years later, as a teacher in Greater Washington, D.C., I too now find myself traversing a desert, though it is not the one I envisioned. A food desert is categorized as a poor urban area where residents cannot afford or are not given access to healthy foods and grocery stores. Every day at 2:45, I watch my students hop on this leaking submarine of a school bus, every block bringing them deeper into an ocean where the only fish they find are fried, where fruits and vegetables are playing an everlasting game of hide and go seek because there are no grocery stores here. Just liquor stores and Popeyes, Dunkin' Donuts and 7-Elevens, children born into a neighborhood that feels more pollution than solution. It is then I realize that I am not too far from the deserts I once dreamed of. See, whether Anacostia or the Sahara, it doesn't make much difference because to Whole Foods, Southeast DC is no different than the Serengeti to them. Brown-skinned little boys like my students are nothing more than walking cacti, just a piece of scenery this world has taught everyone to stay away from. Brianna literally has a landfill in her backyard, so she has a hard time convincing herself the world doesn't just think she's trash. Restaurants come and dump the remains of food she'll never be able to afford to eat. 3 steps through her back door, Jose eats fast food 5 days a week because his mother works 3 jobs to take care of 6 kids and only sees her son when she arrives home from work. At the same time he's leaving for school, he has gotten so big that the excess fat bunked beneath his skin puts added pressure on his joints. His knees are literally crumbling under the weight of this world. Olivia watched her father shot 2 feet from her front porch. She wants nothing more than to go outside and play at the park after school, but gun violence has made a merry-go-round feel more like Russian roulette, so she doesn't go outside. Simply eats any processed food from the cabinet that will last long enough to prevent her from leaving the house too often. These are my students, my warriors, fighting a battle against an enemy they cannot clearly see. These kings and queens meant to feast, not to fester, but their zip code has already told them that their life expectancies are 30 years shorter than the county 7 miles away. I can see the faults of my own ancestry shaking in their eyes. Diabetes and high blood pressure run through the roots of my family tree. Heart disease is as much a part of my history as shackles and segregation. So from my father's kidney transplant to Olivia's asthma, these things are more than mere coincidence. Both grew up in places more accustomed to gunshots than gardens, so tell me place doesn't matter. That the neighborhoods that are predominantly healthy aren't the same ones that are predominantly wealthy, because when you're not choosing between buying your medicine and your groceries, health doesn't have to be a luxury. It doesn't have to be an abstract concept presented in academic journals and policy briefs. My students overcome more every day than I will in my lifetime. They are the roses that grew from the concrete, the budding oasis in the heart of the desert, and their lives are worth far much more than the things that this world has fed them.